Welcome to the Exhaust Note Podcast. I'm Brynn, and this is my guest, Adam Roberts.
Thank you, Brynn, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So, Adam, you work at Cadillac Racing, right?
That's correct. So I work for the 31 Cadillac Whelen, which we race in IMSA in the GTP class. And then occasionally we show up to Le Mans, this 24-hour race you may have heard of.
So what exactly do you work on the car?
So my primary duties, responsibilities, interior. Now, that sounds simple, but there's a lot more to it than that. So primary responsibility is interior mechanic. And then, anytime you're a part of a race team, you have so many other roles in certain situations. So some of the times I get to go over the wall and do pit stops, do tire changes. But those are my two main things. So,
what is the trickiest thing about being an interior mechanic?
The tight spaces, for sure. These cars very close to Formula One level technology. I would actually have to count to give you exact numbers, but many modules, many yards of wiring, a lot of pumps, a lot of connectors, and all of that shoved into a space that you can maybe fit three human bodies inside of. So everything is, you're working a lot off of dexterity, a lot off of feel. A lot of the times you can't even see what you're working on. So that's probably the biggest challenge by far.
What's the most fun part about being on a racing team?
Oh, that's a really hard question to answer because there's so many reasons. I would say the most fun reasons that you initially get into it are ultimately different than what keeps you there. Nowadays, I've been working in racing for so long. Nowadays, it's truly where family and friends are at. That's who I am. That's my culture. That's my people. And the bond you build with so many of those individuals after you travel thousands of miles, spend hours working together, all with one goal of winning, that really creates a bond that you don't get in a lot of other situations. You see it a lot in sports, anything competitive. But that's ultimately, I would say, the most fun about it now. Initially, you get into it for all the exciting reasons that everybody sees. It's cool cars, you're going fast, you're going to cool tracks. And that's still absolutely there. But the people and the bond and, the family that I have there is really, really the best part now.
So you mentioned when I first met you that you used to be a part of a rally team. So what exactly did you do there?
So very similar. One of my biggest strengths is mechanical. So that's where I found myself in a lot of situations. So with the rally team, I was a mechanic on, we had a couple Fiesta R2Ts, which is a WR3 level car. And then I'm forgetting the exact name for it now, but essentially a four-wheel drive, a WRC2 level car, four-wheel drive turbo car. And so I was a mechanic on all of those cars. They were all essentially owned by one individual, but we rented them out to other drivers, and we raced them in the CRC, Canadian Rally Championship, and then ARA, American Rally Association, which is the premier national levels in Canada and here in America. So same thing. I spent a lot of time traveling all over, working on those cars everywhere from fields and gravel lots, which was, interesting, but a lot of fun.
So you also mentioned Le Mans. Have you ever been to a Le Mans event personally?
Yes. So this year, actually, with this team, the Cadillac Whelen team, was my first time there, period. And I got to go as a mechanic on the car, and also got to do tire changes in Le Mans on the car as well for the race. So yeah, I've been there and lived it. It's a really cool event.
What got you, I like to say like from Hot Wheels to where you are now? What was the main like factor that inspired you to pursue this career?
Um, that's an easy answer, and that's my dad. My dad was definitely a car guy. He was a muscle car guy. He grew up in that era, Chevelles, Nova, Mustangs. That was what he loved. He did some, you know, for fun drag racing when I was young, but cars were always around. And he was a firefighter by day, full time, but we really essentially ran a second business in the backyard at night. We had a shop, and he was working on so many cars, and he did that to provide a good living to my family and ultimately give me my racing career, my own driving career. So really, he fostered the love for cars, which ultimately fostered my love for motorsports.
So you're a Cadillac V Series R interior mechanic. What is one part that often goes unnoticed but is important?
So many things, especially on my side of the car, because it's all of the things no one really sees or thinks about. Um, so one thing that is a frequent attention seeker is the driver drink system. So there's literally a system in the car that connects to the driver's helmet for them to be able to drink. You essentially have a bottle, and we'll change it during pit stops because obviously we're doing up to 24-hour races. So almost every pit stop we'll put a fresh water bottle in, and it's just straight water. If the drivers want anything different, we pass it to them through the door in a different bottle for them to drink during the pit stop if it is a long stop. And then, so that system is, let's say, fragile. It requires a lot of attention, and it sounds very silly, a driver drink system, but it's also very important to the driver comfortability, and obviously driving for up to 2.5 hours, potentially they need to be hydrated. So that's definitely something that goes unappreciated, but it's so important.
So kind of going along with this theme, what are some of the biggest challenges of endurance racing?
Having luck on your side. Genuinely. You can do everything right as a team, and all it takes is one thing to go wrong, and everything's undone. So having luck on your side, but really it's just all about being organized and prepared as you possibly can be. Whether that's your attention to detail when you're building the car, your attention to detail when you're preparing spares, when you're even setting up your garage in thought of what if we have this situation during the race and we need to bring the car back to the garage to work on it. How can we set up this garage so we can most effectively handle that situation during the race? So, we will spend weeks, hours, not necessarily me, myself, individuals in the team, just thinking about all of those scenarios and all the equipment and everything we need to be prepared for anything that can be thrown at us. So And you always seem to find new things, but all of this has been learned over many years of racing experience on what could happen. So,
what is, just any fun story you'd like to share that, has happened in your career?
well, I think a fun story is how I've gotten to go to some races. So, last year, this is my first year with the Cadillac Whelen team. And the year before, I was working as a contractor, but mostly with a lot of Porsche racing teams and series. And there was one particular driver, female by name Teresa Lalau, that raced for one of the teams that I worked for. And over the course of the year, her and I built a friendly relationship and supported each other. Later on that year, she was going to go do a race at Spa-Francorchamps, which is a racetrack, very famous racetrack in Belgium, very historic, sought-after track to visit. And she was going to go do a race there. We had built up a good relationship and a lot of trust, and she asked me to come specifically work for her on her car that she was going to be racing at that event. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience that I never saw coming, nor planned for or expected. And all of a sudden, in the course of 2 months, I ended up being at Spa, working on a race car, racing a 12-hour race there. And that's one of several instances of crazy situations I found myself working and racing. Another really cool situation was in 2022. It was the first year of the SRX race series that Ray Everham started. Skip Barber, I was working for Skip Barber at the time, and Skip Barber provided some of the logistics and personnel to support that series. And my boss at the time, boss of Skip Barber, gave me a call one night. It was late at night, and he's like, I'm in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. He's like, can you be in Knoxville like tomorrow? Knoxville, Iowa, which is a 12-hour drive. And I was like, yes, I can. And Knoxville, Iowa is a very iconic dirt oval racetrack. They do $1 million sprint car race there every year. So again, this is like an iconic historic racetrack. 12 hours, I get a call late at night. I drive 12 hours overnight to go work at this event in Knoxville, Iowa the next day. So if you enjoy that kind of lifestyle, which I do, that's very cool. So getting those kind of experiences is something that I definitely enjoy, working and racing.
Out of all of the experiences that you've had in your career, what would you say has been your personal favorite?
So there's so many. One that always rings to my mind as far as level of satisfaction that I got from it was 2021, 2022. I was working for Skip Barber. I started as a car chief, did some engineering role, ultimately ended up being the race team manager. So really I got to curate and cultivate the entire race team. And we had a lot of success. In our first year, we won Drivers' Championship. Our second year, we won Drivers' Teams Championships. Broke a lot of records that a very famous, successful race team set in the 90s in touring car. So to be a part of that, and especially such a vital piece of it, and have that success alongside, again, so many people I had a ton of respect for, and created a bond and friendship that I still have, and to this day with those individuals. And it's really over the course of those 2 years, because 2021 was our first year as a race team. 2022 was the second. We had even more success in our second year, with different drivers also. So that showed the strength of the team, that we could have that level of success with different drivers. So those years definitely gave me a lot of satisfaction.
So what did you and your dad work on?
So, starting out growing up, really, like as long as I can remember, I remember being in the garage. I remember there was a 38 Plymouth sedan that he had like a business sedan, that he had at one point. And mostly I was doing a lot of sanding and rust removal on it. I'm young. I'm 6, 7 years old, maybe. And then at one point we got a Chevelle, that we completely disassembled, sandblasted every nut and bolt on this thing, built the frame from the ground up with everything new, everything painted, everything refurbished. I was doing that before I was 8, 10 years old. So a lot of muscle cars, a lot of hot rods. He happened to be a very excellent painter, as well. So he painted a lot of friends' hot rods and stuff. So I spent hours of sanding and drilling spot welds and, everything he didn't want to do, basically. But all of that taught me so much, from a young age. And then I started racing, driving when I was 10. And then I was working on all of that stuff that we were racing ourselves, from go-karts to legend cars. And I also remember I had a lot of energy too, being young. And one thing he would do was he would buy cars at swap meets, and literally he would just let me disassemble the car, completely tear it apart, and then he would just sell all the pieces from it, especially old Suburbans and everything that had 454 big blocks that guys wanted the motors to be able to build their hot rod with, you know what I mean? So that's really where I learned a lot. Was those years.
So you also mentioned when I first met you, the go-kart racing.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? You were competing at a high level, right?
Yeah. So like I said, my dad was a drag racer, small time amateur just for fun. But ultimately he saw me. I remember when I went to him and said, I want to go racing. Because like I said, I fell in love with cars first. I really fell in love with the, I guess you could call it the engineering aspect of it, the machine part of it. I'm a big Formula One fan, but a Formula One fan because of the amazing level of the car, not necessarily the racing of the Formula One. So he wanted me to start doing junior dragster racing. And I remember at this point, I had already discovered so many other forms of motorsports, and I said, no, I want to turn left and right. I don't want to go straight. So he ended up doing research and found out about professional competitive karting, and found a guy that was somewhat local to us that was pretty successful in it, and we got connected with them, and they taught us a lot about it. And at first, my first year, I only ran in a local club in Circleville, Ohio. But then after that, we learned about this whole new level to karting that was called at the time, and it's still around, World Karting Association, which is a national level karting series in America, where you're traveling all over the country and you're also racing against sons, daughters, family members of already very successful drivers. You know, these are individuals just like so many pro athletes starting and being cultivated from a young age to be the racers of tomorrow. And once you learned about that, and if you ever had a realistic or a serious dream of wanting to become a professional driver, you had to be there. You know, the names that I was racing against are names like Joseph Newgard and Connor Daly. Joseph Newgard's a 2-time, 3-time IndyCar champion now. Connor Daly's been in IndyCar several years. You know, I think some podiums. I think he deserves more success than he's had, but I can't even count how many names are in NASCAR now. Austin, Ty Dillon, Daniel Hemrick, Bubba Wallace. All of these names are names that I grew up around every day, raced with every weekend. So it was really cool. At the time, we knew we were high level, but it's also really cool now seeing where a lot of them have gone to know, like, I competed with those individuals and I have the trophies at home to prove I beat them on my day, because everyone has their day and everybody can be beat. But yeah, karting, I spent 5 years doing that, from 4-cycle to 2-cycle karting. A lot of weekends. I missed a lot of school. But karting was a lot of fun.
So for those who don't know, explain the difference between 4-cycle karting and 2-cycle karting.
Yeah, so 4-cycle and 2-cycle karting is kind of as it sounds. It's mostly an engine difference. The 2-cycle is a 2-stroke engine, and the 4-cycle is a 4-stroke engine. The 4-stroke were mostly Briggs & Stratton, lawnmower engines that were tuned up a little bit. And then the 2-stroke stuff, is stuff you would see on small dirt bikes, things like that. It was pretty funny, though, how the two different engines created a very different kart, and it drove very different. The technique to drive them was very opposite. And a lot of driving technique learned in karting does not apply to cars either, at all. You learn racecraft in karting, but a lot of the actual driving technique, other than your basic lines and apexes, understanding, none of it transfers to cars. So
what is the biggest difference in driving a 2-cycle kart versus a 4-cycle kart?
So the 4-cycle kart is in general slower. So it's more momentum based. You have a lot less, maybe a little more torque, but definitely not as much top end power as the 2-cycle. The 2-cycles rev so much, they just pull and pull and pull all the way down a straightaway. They have seemingly endless power. Whereas a 4-stroke engine, you kind of get to where you're going pretty quickly, and then you're just riding. So when you're driving the 4-stroke kart, it's what we call momentum based. You're trying to carry as much speed through the corner as possible to keep that speed up on the straightaway, because the engine doesn't have the power to bring it back up to that speed. Whereas the 2-stroke, it has power, so you can drive it a little more aggressively through the corners because you have the power to come out of the corners. And also with the 2-cycle, you're entering corners a lot quicker as well. So that changes the way you're braking for the corner when you're turning in for the corner. And also, the vehicle dynamics of the kart at that point, because really your tires between a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke kart are in theory the same tire, but all of a sudden you're heading into a corner much quicker than you would in a 4-stroke kart. So it changes everything about, the way you turn in, the way you get through the middle of the corner and even exit the corner. So I remember like the 4-stroke karts, some of the lower classes, you would literally just hold the gas pedal wide open throttle, and you would just drag the brake when you wanted to slow down, because you could slow down enough with the brake, and by holding the thing wide open throttle, you kept the engine RPMs up. These had a centrifugal clutch on them, kind of like a golf cart. So by keeping that RPM up, that clutch would be engaged quicker, which means you're accelerating sooner. The 2-stroke kart, you were carrying so much speed, you could go into a corner, just completely lift off the throttle, turn it, pitch it, just let it slide, and then just whale it back to wide open throttle once you got straight. A 4-stroke kart, if you did anything like that, you would slow it down and kill all of your speed. You would be chugging all the way down the straightaway to get back up to it. Whereas then, in the 2-stroke, if you tried to take the momentum and carry speed into the corner, the kart just didn't handle right. And that just wasn't the full potential of the kart. The tires have so much grip, you can just slide it in there. For instance, to give you an idea, a couple years ago, I did a year of karting, and at Pit Race, which is a racetrack in Pittsburgh, which is actually unfortunately closing at the end of this year. It's now becoming supposedly a data center. In turn 1 there, I was hitting 3.1 Gs. 3.1 Gs is low level fighter jet Gs in a go-kart. So, the cornering potential of go-kart is absurd. So,
Adam and I had a great time talking, so there's a part 2 to this episode coming in the following weeks. Stay tuned.